The ground shakes beneath your feet as another Soviet shell tears through what's left of the chancellery above. You grip the steering wheel of a car that will never drive again and wonder how it all came to this. The air down here tastes like concrete dust, diesel fumes, and the slow rot of a dying empire. Every breath reminds you that 50 feet of earth is the only thing between you and annihilation. You can hear the distant thunder of Katyusha rockets walking their way across the Tiergarten, each impact closer than the last. The overhead lights flicker, and for a moment the bunker goes completely dark. Someone is screaming in a room down the corridor, not from pain, but from the kind of madness that settles in when hope has been dead for weeks. You press your palms against your ears and try to remember what silence sounded like. Your name doesn't matter anymore. Nothing about you matters anymore. You are simply the man who drives the most hated person on earth, and the world above is coming to collect its debt. But before the end, before the gasoline and the gunshot and the shallow grave in the garden, let's go back to the beginning, to the day you first turned the ignition key and sealed your fate. The year is 1936, and you are 23 years old, standing at attention outside the Reich Chancellery, in a uniform so stiff it could stand up without you. Your boots are polished to mirrors, and your heart is hammering against your ribs. You were selected from a pool of 200 candidates, all tested for driving skill, loyalty, discretion, and the ability to keep your mouth permanently shut. They checked your bloodline back 4 generations. A senior SS officer walks down the line of candidates, eliminating men with a glance. He stops in front of you, studies your face, and asks a single question: would you die for the Führer? Without hesitation, you answer, and you mean it. God help you, in this moment you actually mean every word. The officer nods and moves on, and your life changes forever. They assign you to the motor pool at the Berghof first, driving supply vehicles and staff cars through the Bavarian Alps. The mountains are so beautiful, they make you forget what country you're serving. You learn the roads by heart, every curve, every gradient, every spot where ice forms in winter. Driving becomes meditation, and the Mercedes engines become your prayer wheels. After 6 months of flawless service, they pull you aside and tell you that you've been selected for a special assignment, the SS Begleitkommando, the personal escort command. You will drive the Führer's personal vehicle, a black Mercedes-Benz 770K grosser, 7 tons of armor-plated steel with bulletproof glass 3 centimeters thick. When you first see it, you run your hand across the hood like it's a living thing. They teach you defensive driving, J-turns, ramming techniques, how to navigate through an ambush at speed while keeping the passenger compartment steady. You practice until your wrists ache and your reflexes are razor sharp. The first time you drive him, your hands tremble on the wheel so badly you're certain he'll notice. He sits in the back seat reviewing documents and says nothing for the entire 40-minute drive. When you open his door at the destination, he steps out, adjusts his coat, and looks at you for exactly 1 second. "Smooth ride," he says, and then he's gone behind a wall of bodyguards. Those 2 words fuel you for months. You replay them in your head during every drive, every maintenance check, every sleepless night. You have been acknowledged by the most powerful man in Europe, and it fills you with a pride that will later curdle into shame. You drive him through the streets of Munich, Nuremberg, and Berlin, past crowds so thick and frenzied they rock the car with their adulation. Flowers bounce off the bulletproof windshield like confetti. You drive him to meetings with generals, whose names you recognize from newspapers, to rallies where 100,000 people chant in unison. Through the rearview mirror, you watch him rehearse gestures and facial expressions like an actor preparing for a stage. You are invisible, the perfect servant, the silent witness, the man whose hands control 7 tons of steel, but who has no control over anything else. You hear conversations you will never repeat, and see faces you will never forget. By 1939, when the tanks roll into Poland and the world catches fire, you have been driving this man for 3 years. You know how he takes his tea, when he sleeps, and the exact pressure he prefers on the accelerator, and you still don't truly know what you're a part of. Now, fast forward. The year is 1943, and the war has turned. Stalingrad has swallowed an entire army, and the mood in the chancellery has shifted from triumphant to something darker, something with teeth. You drive him less frequently now. He retreats to the wolf's lair in East Prussia, buried in forests and paranoia. The assassination attempt in July 1944 nearly kills him, and after that, everything changes. His hands shake now. You notice it when he reaches for the car door, a tremor he tries to hide by clasping his left hand behind his back. The man in your rearview mirror is deteriorating in front of your eyes. You are reassigned to Berlin as the Eastern Front collapses, and in January 1945, you descend into the Führerbunker for what you're told will be a temporary stay. Temporary, they say, as if the word still has meaning. The bunker is a concrete labyrinth, 2 levels, 30 rooms, buried beneath the Chancellery Garden. The walls sweat condensation, and the ventilation system groans like a dying animal. Your quarters are a concrete closet with a cot, a single bulb, and a photograph of your mother that you've carried since 1936. You tape it to the wall and try to remember what her voice sounds like. The upper level houses the kitchen, the dining area, and the servants' quarters. It smells permanently of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke. The lower level belongs to him, and it smells of medication, anxiety, and something you can only describe as decay. You maintain the vehicles in the underground garage, even though there's almost nowhere left to drive. You check the engines, rotate the tires, top off the fuel, rituals from a world that no longer exists. The Mercedes sits in the garage like a museum piece, its black paint dulled by concrete dust. You polish it anyway, because if you stop performing your duties, you'll have to confront the reality of what's happening above. You hear the situation reports through the thin walls. The Soviets are at the Oder River, 60 kilometers from Berlin. Generals argue in voices that rise to breaking points and then suddenly go quiet. He calls you upstairs one evening to move a car within the garage, and you see him up close for the first time in weeks. The deterioration shocks you. His skin is gray, his posture stooped, and his left arm hangs at his side like a broken wing. His eyes, though, his eyes are the same, ice blue and burning with a conviction that has outlived all contact with reality. Eva Braun arrives in the bunker in March 1945, and her presence changes the atmosphere in ways you can't articulate. She brings lipstick and champagne and a desperate gaiety that feels like dancing on a coffin. She greets you by name, she always has, and asks about your family as if you're meeting at a garden party. You tell her your mother is well, though you haven't heard from her in 4 months and have no idea if she's alive. The bunker fills with people, generals, adjutants, secretaries, SS officers, communication technicians, and a small army of guards. 40-odd people crammed into a space designed for a fraction of that number. You hear the typewriters clacking day and night, transmitting orders to armies that may or may not still exist. The maps on the conference table show unit positions that are hours or days out of date. A general moves a tiny flag on the map and declares a counterattack, and you watch from the doorway as everyone in the room pretends this flag represents something real. The gap between the map and reality is now an ocean. You start sleeping with your boots on, because the shelling never stops, and the thought of dying barefoot seems somehow worse than dying itself. The cot shakes with every impact, a metronome of destruction. Food becomes scarce. The kitchen stretches supplies into watery soups and hard bread that tastes like sawdust. Upstairs in his private dining room, the Führer eats the same vegetarian dishes he's always eaten, prepared by his personal cook, as if nothing has changed. You are tasked with making supply runs to the surface, quick, terrifying dashes to the Chancellery garage to retrieve crates of water and canned goods. Each trip is a coin flip between life and death. The first time you climb the stairs to the surface, the daylight blinds you. When your eyes adjust, you see a Berlin that looks like the surface of the moon: craters, rubble, smoke, and the distant rattle of machine gun fire. A building across the Wilhelmstrasse collapses while you watch, folding in on itself like a house of cards in slow motion. Dust rolls toward you like a wave, and you grab the crates and run back to the stairs. Down in the bunker, you report what you've seen, and the officers nod as if you've described a mild rainstorm. The disconnection between the world above and the world below is now complete. Children appear in the bunker, the Goebbels children, 6 of them, ranging in age from 4 to 12. They play in the corridors and sing songs, and their laughter echoes off concrete walls in a way that makes your stomach turn. The youngest, Haida, asks you if you'll take her for a ride in the big black car when the war is over. You kneel down and tell her yes, and it's the most painful lie you've ever told. Alcohol flows freely now. Officers drink openly, discipline fraying at the edges like a burning flag. You allow yourself 1 glass of schnapps per night, held in both hands, sip slowly, a tiny ceremony of normalcy. The radio brings nothing but bad news. The Americans have crossed the Rhine, the British are at Hamburg, and the Soviets are grinding through the suburbs of Berlin block by block. The ring is closing. He rages in the conference room, screaming about betrayal, about generals who have failed him, about an entire nation that has proven unworthy of his vision. You hear the muffled explosions of his fury through 2 closed doors and 6 inches of concrete. After these tirades, a silence settles over the bunker that's worse than the screaming. People move through the corridors like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, each person calculating their own odds of survival. You find a secretary weeping in the corridor at 3 in the morning, and you sit with her without speaking. There are no words left that mean anything, so you offer the only thing you have, your silent presence. Someone has brought a gramophone into the bunker, and at odd hours you hear music drifting through the corridors. Wagner, naturally, but also waltzes and folk songs that seem to belong to a country that no longer exists. The music makes the concrete walls feel even colder. You check the Mercedes one last time, running the engine for 5 minutes to keep the battery alive. The exhaust fills the garage, and for a fleeting moment you consider sitting in the car and letting the fumes take you somewhere quieter. You turn the engine off, close the door, and walk back into the bunker. Whatever is coming, you've decided to see it through. Not out of loyalty anymore, but out of something closer to inertia. April 20th, 1945. His birthday, his last birthday, though only a few people in the bunker know this yet. He is 56 years old, and he looks 80. There is a small reception in the upper bunker. Champagne, handshakes, the hollow ritual of celebration while the ceiling shakes from Soviet artillery. You stand by the door and watch powerful men line up to congratulate a man who has destroyed them all. Generals urge him to leave Berlin, to flee south to the Alps, where a last stand could be organized in the mountain fortress. He refuses, and in his refusal you hear the sound of a door slamming shut on every person in this bunker. Over the next 2 days, people begin to leave, those with the means and the nerve to attempt an escape through the Soviet lines. Each departure thins the bunker population and thickens the despair. Göring sends a telegram suggesting he should take over leadership of the Reich, and the Führer erupts in a rage so violent that the walls seem to vibrate. He strips Göring of all titles and orders his arrest. Himmler attempts to negotiate surrender through the Swedes, and when the news reaches the bunker, the betrayal hits like a physical blow. You watch the Führer's face cycle through shock, fury, and something that looks almost like grief. He orders Himmler's arrest too, but the order floats into a void. There is no one left to enforce it, no apparatus of power remaining, just words dissolving into static on dying radio frequencies. On April 25th, the Soviets complete their encirclement of Berlin. You are now inside a concrete box, inside a surrounded city, inside a collapsing nation, and there is no road left for you to drive. The shelling intensifies to a constant roar, not individual explosions anymore, but a single continuous sound, like standing inside a drum being beaten by 1,000 hands. Concrete dust falls from the ceiling, like gray snow. Water seeps through cracks in the walls, and the air grows thick and humid. The ventilation system struggles, and you can taste the diesel fumes from the generators mixing with the stale breath of 40 terrified people. He holds his final military conference, moving non-existent divisions across a map of a city that is 90% rubble. The generals stand at attention and nod at orders that will never be carried out, and you understand that this is theater, the last performance of a regime built entirely on spectacle. On April 28th, he marries Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony in the map room. You are not invited, but you hear about it within minutes. News travels at the speed of whispers in these corridors. A wedding cake appears from somewhere, a small, sad thing made with whatever the kitchen could scrounge. Champagne is poured, and for 20 minutes, people pretend that a wedding in a bunker under siege is a cause for celebration. You catch a glimpse of Eva, now Eva Hitler, through an open door, and she is smiling with a radiance that seems to come from another dimension. She has chosen this end deliberately, and her certainty terrifies you more than the artillery. He dictates his final testament that night, and the typewriter clacking echoes through the bunker like a mechanical heartbeat. You hear fragments through the walls, blame, justification, the same rhetoric that built an empire now serving as its epitaph. He orders that his body be burned after death. He has seen the photographs of Mussolini hanging upside down in Milan, and the image has burrowed into his mind like a parasite. He will not be displayed, he will not be a trophy. You are summoned to help arrange fuel for the cremation. You carry jerrycans of gasoline up to the garden entrance and line them against the wall, each one sloshing with the liquid that will write the final sentence of this story. Your hands smell like gasoline, and you wash them in a basin of gray water, but the smell won't come off. You wonder if it will ever come off. April 29th, the bunker's atmosphere is beyond description. People drink openly, weep openly, embracing corridors. All pretense of military discipline has evaporated like water on a hot engine block. You hear that the Soviets are less than a kilometer from the chancellery. Through the air vents, you can hear the chatter of their submachine guns, a sound like typewriters typing your death sentence. Someone distributes cyanide capsules, small brass cylinders containing glass ampules of prussic acid. You are given one, and you hold it in your palm, marveling at how small the distance is between living and not. You put the capsule in your breast pocket and button it closed. You haven't decided yet, and the not deciding feels like the only freedom you have left. April 30th, 1945, the last day. You wake to a silence that is somehow louder than the shelling, as if the bunker itself is holding its breath. He has lunch with his secretaries and his cook, a meal of spaghetti with a light sauce, the kind of ordinary food that seems grotesque in this context. You are told he is calm, even pleasant, as if a decision has brought him peace. At approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, he says goodbye to the remaining staff, shaking hands and moving down the line with the mechanical precision of a man who has rehearsed this moment. When he reaches you, his handshake is weak, his palm damp. He looks at you and says nothing. No final words, no grand statement, just a nod that contains every mile you've driven together, every silent hour behind the wheel, every secret you've kept. Then he turns and walks into his private study with Eva. The door closes, you stand in the corridor with a dozen others, and nobody speaks. At 3:30, you hear a single gunshot, muffled by the heavy door, but unmistakable in the silence. A few moments later, the door opens, and the smell that rolls out is gunpowder and bitter almonds. You are among those ordered to carry the bodies to the garden. You lift him by the legs while another man takes the shoulders, and he is lighter than you expected. This man who weighed so heavily on the world. In the Chancellery Garden, under a sky choked with smoke and ash, You pour gasoline over the bodies and step back. A match is lit and the flames leap up with a sound like wings, and you stand at attention one final time as everything burns. You descend back into the bunker, and the world down here has already changed. The tension has snapped like a wire, replaced by a frantic, animal urgency to survive. People are burning documents, changing into civilian clothes, and planning escape routes. Goebbels and his wife remain, and over the next hours, the unthinkable happens. The 6 children are put to bed for the last time. You see Magda Goebbels walking through the corridor with a face carved from white stone, and you press yourself against the wall to let her pass. You can't stay here. The Soviets will breach the bunker within hours, and capture means interrogation, prison, or a bullet in a courtyard. You strip off your uniform and pull on civilian clothes scrounged from a dead man's locker, a worn coat, dark trousers, a cap that smells like someone else's hair. You look in a shard of mirror and see a stranger. At 10 o'clock that night, you join a breakout group, 30 men and a handful of women attempting to cross the Soviet lines and reach the West. The plan is thin, the odds are worse, but staying is certain death. You climb the stairs to the surface for the last time, and Berlin at night is a vision of hell. Buildings burning like torches, tracer rounds stitching across the sky in green and red, the constant crack of rifles echoing through empty streets. Your group moves through the U-Bahn tunnels, wading through knee-deep water that is ice-cold and black. Rats swim past your legs, and somewhere behind you, someone is praying in a whisper. You emerge near the Weidendammer Bridge, and the scene above ground is chaos. German soldiers and civilians streaming north. Soviet tanks visible 2 blocks away, their turrets swiveling like the heads of mechanical predators. A Soviet machine gun opens up, and the group scatters. You dive behind a pile of rubble and press your face into brick dust, while bullets crack the air above your head like whips. You run through alleys, over rubble, past bodies that you don't look at, because looking means stopping, and stopping means dying. Your lungs burn, and your legs feel like they belong to someone else. By dawn, you are alone, separated from the group, crouching in the basement of a bombed-out apartment building. A German family huddles in the corner, an old woman, a young mother, 2 children, and they stare at you with eyes that have seen too much to be afraid of one more stranger. You stay in that basement for 2 days, eating nothing, drinking rainwater collected in a tin can. The sounds of battle fade as the Soviet forces consolidate their hold on the city. On May 2nd, you hear a loudspeaker announcing Berlin's surrender in Russian and broken German. The war in this city is over, and you are still alive, a fact that feels more like an accident than a miracle. You walk out of the basement with your hands raised, and a Soviet soldier no older than 18 points a submachine gun at your chest. His eyes are exhausted and angry and frightened all at once, and you see yourself in them. They process you in a holding area. Hundreds of men standing in the rain, being sorted into categories: soldier, civilian, party member, SS. You claim to be a mechanic, and somehow, impossibly, they believe you. You spend 6 months in a Soviet filtration camp, sleeping on bare ground, eating cabbage soup that is mostly water, answering the same questions from different interrogators. You hold to your story like a drowning man holds to driftwood. They release you in the winter of 1945, and you walk west through a Germany that looks like a country after the apocalypse. Cities flattened, refugees filling every road, the stench of death hanging over everything like weather. You reach a small town in Bavaria where no one knows your name or your history. You find work on a farm, and the rhythm of physical labor begins to fill the spaces where the war used to be. You never speak about the bunker, not to the farmer, not to the woman you eventually marry, not to the children who call you Papa and have no idea where your hands have been. The secret sits inside you like a stone. At night, the dreams come without fail. The concrete corridors, the smell of gasoline, the weight of a body lighter than it should have been. You wake up with your hands gripping invisible jerry cans and your heart pounding against your ribs. In 1955, a journalist comes to the town asking questions about former regime members, and you spend 3 days hiding in the barn loft, barely breathing, listening to your wife tell the man she's never heard of any driver. The decades pass. Germany rebuilds, the wall goes up, the wall comes down, and you grow old in the shadows of a history that the world will never stop examining. You read the books they write and recognize nothing of your own experience in their pages. Your wife finds the photograph of the Mercedes in your dresser drawer after you have a stroke, and she holds it up to your face with trembling hands. You look at the car in the picture and see a coffin on wheels, and you close your eyes. On your deathbed, a priest asks if you have anything to confess. You open your mouth, and the words that come out are not about God or forgiveness. They are about a little girl named Haida who asked you for a ride in a big black car. You die in a small Bavarian farmhouse in 1987, and they bury you under a headstone that bears only your name and dates. No one at the funeral knows that the quiet old farmer once held the steering wheel of history, and that history drove itself straight into hell.